The Be Quiet Silent Base 802 is the direct successor for the Be Quiet Silent Base 801 case. This new model brings out numerous improvements and a better overall design. Not only that, but this case can be configured to be either really silent or have more airflow that you'd ever wanted, and it leaves that choice up to you. However, all this will come at a price, close to $200 or euros to be exact. Well, I found this case in some places for around 170, but your mileage might vary. By default, the Silent Base 802 is delivered with the quiet configuration, which means that both the front and top panels are completely sealed off by panels that have on their underside noise suppression foam. The front panel is very easy to remove, as you just push it upwards. This solid panel can be replaced with the included metal mesh panel, which allows for a good airflow to be drawn inside the chassis. The top side of the case is covered by not one but two separated panels. The front bigger panel is solid and allows for no airflow, while the back panel is smaller and has vents cut out into its surface to allow for some airflow to escape the case. These can be installed either as separate units or both at the same time. The reasoning for having such a vented smaller panel at the top is to dampen the noise as much as possible while also offering some degree of airflow. These two panels can be replaced by the included mesh panel, which sits attached to the case by the usage of several magnetic strips. One great feature of this case is when you start using the side panels. These panels are not held in place by screws or thumb screws. These panels can be removed by simply pressing a button at the back of the case, which releases the panel at the top. Then you just lift the panel and it's removed. The main panel has solid glass, not plexiglass or a type of acrylic, but solid glass, and it is very easy to handle and remove thanks to the fact that it has enlarged plastic frames at the top. The Silent Base 802 also has plenty of dust filtration. Up front, behind whatever panel you choose, there is a massive dust filter that covers the entire height of the front of the case. This one is held in place by just a regular plastic clip. The other dust filter is found on the underside of the case. This is a long filter that covers the entire length of the case. Notice a pattern here. And it does filter the intake for both the power supply at the back and the front side of the floor. Fortunately, this filter is easy to remove and you do that at the front of the case, which means that you have easy access to this filter. Going back to the design of this case, the Silent Base 802 is a good looking case, especially in white. There's no useless RGB and graphics plastered all over the place, and no moronic sci-fi shapes made out of plastic to enhance the gaming experience. This is just a good looking case. It also has these lovely feet at the bottom which create a floating effect. By the way, you can use the case without the feet if you want to. Speaking of the feet, these are made from hard plastic and have plenty of rubber on the underside to provide a good grip for the case and prevent scratches. These feet are not pre-installed on the case and it's up to you to snap them into their place, which is fairly easy. When speaking of the cooling options, the Silent Base 802 has two 140mm fans pre-installed at the front. These are the Be Quiet Pure Wing 2 models and have a maximum rated speed of 1000 RPM. At the front you can install either 3 140mm fans or 3 120mm fans. Don't worry, we'll get to the radiator support in a jiffy. At the back of the case there is a pre-installed 140mm Pure Wings 2, the same fan as those found at the front of the case. Up top you have a choice of installing either 3 140 or 3 120mm fans. The radiator support is extensive. At the front you can install the following radiator sizes: 120, 140, 240, 280, 360 and 420mm, with plenty of thickness too. At the back you can install either a 120 or a 140mm radiator, and at the top you can install either a single 120, a 240 or a 360mm radiator. Speaking of the top of the case, there's a feature here that all cases should have starting today. The top of the case is in fact removable and it is a sliding drawer. You just remove two screws and slide the whole metal plate out to the side. You install what you need to install here and then place everything back and slide them into the chassis. It can't get any easier than this. The I/O panel of the Silent Base 802 is pretty good, with a large power button that also lights up in white when the system is powered on. The I/O panel includes 2 USB 3.0 ports, 1 headphone jack, 1 microphone jack, a USB Type-C port, and a 2-phase fan controller switch. Also, there is a reset button here and a hard drive activity LED. At the back of the case, there is also a nifty yet standard vertical graphic card mount. However, keep in mind that the PCIe riser cable is not included with the case, so you have to get your own. Inside the case, there are more good news. First of all, the entire lower side of the interior of this case is covered by plastic panels. The large side panels can be easily removed by pressing on the middle top edge. The top small panel can be popped off from the frame of the chassis, revealing a honeycomb pattern stamped into the case. Speaking of space, at the front, if you remove just the front mounted plastic panel, you get more clearance and thus you can install thicker radiators. Above the motherboard tray, there are no rubber grommets installed to pass through the wires and cables. However, here there is this massive gap that allows for easy access to even the largest of cables. Fortunately, on the side of the motherboard, there are plenty of rubber grommets for cable management. These plastic panels you see covering the right side of the motherboard tray can be removed. The idea here is that if you want to have a hard drive and an SSD cage installed inside the case and right into the airflow of the front fans, you remove one of these plastic covers and just install one of the included hard drive cages. If you don't want that, then you can leave the covers in place and get this lovely clean interior. Speaking of the hard drive cages, one of them is pre-installed on the lower part of the case, away from prying eyes of onlookers. This cage can be easily removed as it's only secured in place with several thumb screws. Actually, the bracket that holds the hard drive cage in place can also be removed as well, for a wide open space on the bottom of the case. The back of the case shows even more, as there's plenty of space for routing all your cables, some which are already routed from the factory. There are up to 3 SSD spaces to install, one at the back and the other 2 covering the CPU cutout at the top. Speaking of this dual SSD tray, fortunately it can be removed with ease as it's held in place by just a thumb screw, so you still have easy access to the backplate. At the back of the motherboard tray there is also this fan hub. This little thing, not only can it power up to 6 fans with ease, but it's also linked to both your motherboard so you can control your fans via software or use the fan controller located on the I/O panel of the case. One feature that is not really advertised as much with the Silentbase 802 is the fact that this case is modular and thus you can invert its layout. Yeah, I'm not actually trying to do that, as it's a pain to do so, because everything related to your system has to be moved around. The I/O cables, some brackets and the tray itself, plus the side panels, but you can do it if you want to. The power supply installation is done with ease as you remove the power supply bracket, install it on your power supply and install everything into the case with thumb screws. With the system installed in the Silentbase 802, we get to see just how much space is left for water cooling or for more storage units to be installed up front. One slight disadvantage with the massive space above the motherboard tray is that each cable goes its own way and it creates a messy look. Also, for a case this rich in features and good with build quality, there aren't that many tie-down points available at the back, which is slightly disappointing. Moving on, there's ample space for the graphics card and the same can be said for the CPU cooler, in this case a Silverstone 240 IO cooler. The system used for testing the case is using an Intel i9 9900K and a full ATX motherboard, the ASRock Z390 Phantom Gaming X to be specific. The graphics card is a MSI RTX 2070 Super Trio X model. In terms of the temperatures, there's almost a 7 degrees Celsius difference between having the solid panels installed versus the airflow panels, which makes my point that the solid panels should not really be used unless you're going for that type of a system. Especially for the CPU temperature, with the airflow panels installed, the CPU had a temperature of 57 degrees Celsius. However, with the closed-off panels installed, the temperature jumped to 64 degrees. Which is no surprise as the radiator of the cooler has nowhere to exhaust the hot air and thus the entire system gets warmer as a result. This result, and all of them, are achieved with the same ambient temperature fixed at 26 degrees Celsius. The graphics card temperature is next, and again we see how much the temperature is affected by essentially blocking off the main intake of the case. With the airflow panels installed, the RTX 2070 Super Trio remained at a steady 75 degrees Celsius with the IDA 64 Extreme system stability test. However, when the noise cancelling panels are installed, the temperature jumps to 81 degrees Celsius, as there is not so much air getting into the case. When we talk about the actual noise output of the case, it's very low. The noise output with all the included fans running at their maximum speed of 1000 RPM results in an output of 40 decibels with the airflow panels installed. However, if the solid panels are installed, then the noise output drops to almost 34 decibels. With the solid panels in place, there is some space left for the fans at the front to draw some air, but it's not enough to justify using the solid panel. Not only that, but this case with the airflow panels in place is extremely quiet, the quietest cases I've ever tested. Thus, using the solid panels will result in a minimal noise benefit and will only increase the temperature inside the case. The Be Quiet Silent Base 802 is a really good case. It offers plenty of features to handle both an air-cooled system or a high-end custom liquid cool system. Yes, there are plenty of plastics used on this case, but there is also plenty of metal as well, so that evens out. The side panels are very easy to take out, and the same can be said for the dust filters. This case is also leaving the option to the user to either use the airflow mesh panels or the solid noise dampening panels, and that was a good move on Be Quiet's part. Not only does this offer more flexibility in how you build your system, but it can create scenarios when specific systems are created, like mesh at the front but closed off panels at the top, and so on. This case is not cheap at all, but you do get a lot for your money, especially in terms of the build quality. The low noise operation is also a factor here. I'd advise against using the solid panels, as using the mesh panels and lowering the speed of the fans will get you a better result, both in terms of the temperature and also in terms of the noise. If you like this review, then you may consider subscribing for more, and also if you want to support the channel in a direct way, then in the description below you will find both the links for the Patreon and the subscriber start pages of this channel.